Hello, Dr. Marco Tavanti here at University of San Francisco. I'm happy to be with you to give you an overview of the Sustainable Development Goals and their progress and how we arrived to them. And I will also give you some insights on sustainability reporting and the importance of measurability of these goals and sustainability in general. So I'll show you a few slides following these two parts of the presentation. The first part has to do with the progress toward the SDGs, particularly now that we are celebrating 5 years from the 2015 commitment on the 17 SDGs in the Agenda 2030. In the second part, I will show you a few overviews of sustainability reporting tools and mechanisms that exist out there. It's just an overview. Obviously, it doesn't go into many details, but hopefully the various examples and website will help you to get more interested in these topics. Let's start with the first section. I have three premises before we start. First of all, what do we mean by sustainability? You might be familiar with the so-called sustainability development definition, that came out from 1987 Brundtland report that is about meeting the present needs of current generation without compromising the ability of future generations to achieve their own needs. I like also to think about sustainability as a people well-being, which is obviously even more urgent and understood in these priorities of today's as we face the pandemics of COVID-19. It's also about planet resilience. And we see that obviously the adaptation to the ongoing climate changes is mandatory and important for the survival of humanity and the species and the nature that we're all codependent. And it's also about economic prosperities as not only possibility for equity, but also for not just profit for a few, but prosperity for the many. The second premise have to do with awareness that we have this responsibility toward the future generation. And this is something that obviously from a legal standpoint is difficult to grasp, but from a moral and ethical standpoint, we need to be aware that sustainability is also about thinking long-term and thinking about with the awareness that we really borrow the earth from our children and future generations. The third premise have to do with measuring sustainability. It's obviously as often attributed to Peter Drucker, this phrase, you cannot manage what you cannot measure. It's true. We cannot achieve and hoping to arrive to a more better, sustainable, more resilient, more flourishing, more prosperous future if we don't know how to measure our progress to it. And that's what this presentation is about. But before we get to this, obviously we are familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals by now after 5 years of implementation and strong engagement from many sectors and countries and key players around the world. We are familiar with these icons and this and the SDGs, the 17 SDGs. Many are not familiar with the behind the SDGs is obviously the commitment of 193 countries. There is 169 targets and 232 indicators that measures the progress toward those targets and goals. The so-called 3 pillars of sustainability are also reflected across those 17 goals. The economic pillar, the environmental pillar, and the social pillar. But in reality, with the Agenda 2030, we are talking about 5 pillars, where not only people, planet, and prosperity, not profit, but also peace and partnership play an important role. And behind peace, obviously, is about policy and institutions, and behind partnerships is this important of collaboration and contribution, particularly in a world made of many inequalities. How do we get there? The 1962 famous publication from Rachel Carson, Silent Spring, obviously made particularly United States more aware, people in the United States, that obviously were in this codependency with an environment, particularly in agricultural sectors, that certainly affect our own health. In 1972, the Club of Rome, this club of experts, which is still also active today, a descendant actually of an important group of l'Accademia Lincea in Rome that actually started 500 years ago this process of science that sponsored even Galileo Galilei to use science in our own decision making. They made the point in 1972 that we cannot just think about economic growth without understanding the limit of environmental resources. In 1987, the Brundtland report, as I mentioned, with the World Commission on Environment and Development, was really an important milestone for defining our common future and our codependency within the natural environment that is as priority, together with other priorities for poverty alleviation and development. In the 1992, during the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, the so-called Agenda 21 was certainly an important step toward achieving those concrete resolutions and paradigms for policy implementation at the country level with the different other actors. In the year 2000, Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, implemented for the first time this idea, this common agenda with goals, right? The so-called Millennium Development Goals, these 8 goals, which were primarily about development of the global South, but integrating also some aspect, particularly in the MDG 7 on environment. And in the same year, he also started his important organization and forum within the United Nations, the so-called Global Compact, which opened up the door of the United Nations mission, not only to government and intergovernmental bodies, not only to NGOs, but also to private sector enterprises and corporations, which was not an easy step, but certainly necessary in order to achieve those important common agenda. In 2012, with so-called Rio +20, was for the first time developed the list of initial sustainable development goals, which they were later finalized in 2015 with the Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development document, which was approved by the General Assembly of that year. Important that in this very same year, the Paris Climate Accord was also a very important step. I would also suggest that in terms of mindset for sustainability, also the publication of Pope Francis' encyclical Laudato Si was also one of the important steps of 2015. So where are we 5 years after the implementation and agreement of the SDGs and the 2030 Agenda? Well, obviously, the COVID-19, as Antonio Gutierrez, the current Secretary General, has highlighted in the recent SDG progress report, there is the more equal, inclusive, and sustainable economy and society that are more resilient is obviously undermined, but also requires more commitment at the international and the various level commitments. So I'll give you an overview of where some of the progress that are more detailed in the report. But obviously, if the end of poverty was a little bit off track before COVID-19. With COVID-19, we see the possibility of an increase of, for the first time, of global poverty, much more than we have seen in decades. The same thing for zero hunger, the goal number 2. Obviously, the food insecurity is increased by the interconnectedness of pandemics that threatens the food systems. The good health and well-being for SDG 3, obviously we need to see more acceleration and more serious investment on this. We see the priority of health during these pandemics, but unfortunately this has created more disruption and reversed decades of improvements in the health systems because of the emergency for the pandemics. In terms of education, also we understand that the ongoing inequality have been obviously affected, even worsened with the COVID-19 implication, with many schools closing, etc. In terms of gender inequality and gender equity, we have seen that obviously with the lockdown, we have seen the risk of more violence against women and girls. And for clean water and sanitation, we see that the importance recommendation of washing your hands. And unfortunately, many communities around the world do not have access to water, making those recommendations much more difficult. In terms of affordable clean energy, we have seen how many hospitals do not have 1 in 4 are not electrified in many developing countries, making difficulties access to reliable energy. In terms of decent work, we have seen the worst economic recession since the Great Depression, and obviously has affected many development programs around the world. The industry, innovation, and infrastructure has declined, so there is many shortcomings that we have seen in the tracking of this goal. In terms of reduction of inequality, unfortunately, this is one of the major problems that we face around the world, and it should be a priority, certainly for us and future generation, because we don't see any diminishing of the gap between the wealthiest and the poorest. SDG 11 on sustainable cities, obviously we have seen a growth in slums living, in informal settlers around the cities that obviously is undermining the health conditions and other basic living infrastructures necessary for a life of dignity. In terms of responsible consumption and production, we still continue with numerous metric tons and the consumption of many planets to maintain certain lifestyle. Climate action, obviously we see the increase of climate change that is affecting communities at many levels. And the life below water in terms of the ocean with the increase of acidity that is affecting actually the climate enormously and the well-being of life below water. In terms of biodiversity, we have seen also these zoonotic diseases, this how we are interconnected and how the wildlife trafficking often could contribute to the spread of infectious diseases. In terms of peace and security, we see the increase also of violence in femicide, and obviously the need of numerous policies for peace, particularly if we think also about refugees and migrants that are even more under threats because of COVID and restrictions of traveling. In terms of partnership for the goal, we've seen that the hope that was placed before on remittances is under threats because of this recession. And so this is kind of a panoramic of some of these reports that are not very happy, and yet should be about our own commitment. You can read more about this report on the 2020 SDG report, and this concludes our first part of this presentation. The second part, as we talked about the SDGs and the progress toward the Sustainable Development Goals, we also need to understand how reporting plays an important role for having a better world, for achieving better situations. And so there are also three premises here. One is, first one is like, why reporting? Yeah, even report is a voluntary action. Actually, we see in countries like in European Union legislation, corporations of 500 plus employees, they have to do an annual, not just financial, but also environmental and social reporting following the global reporting initiatives. So we see also the growth of many new careers like chief sustainability officers. And this is really an attempt to go beyond the greenwashing, so-called, this kind of a superficial CSR reporting and really implementing sustainability across many levels of the organizations. It's also about going beyond the blue washing. Blue washing is in reference to those organizations that connect with the United Nations, the blue flag of the United Nations and its mission, but often in a superficial way without doing proper contribution and alignment. So the premise number two is about the alignment between principle, which often is missing. Unfortunately, we don't agree even in principles, but often the principle need to be translated into reality, into practices. And that's what these sustainability reporting help us to implement mechanisms that translate the principles into practices. And then premise number three is that there is a lot of important players that I invite you all to be familiar. If you're not familiar with those important logos, explore more. I will describe a few of them with you today, but just certainly those are important initiatives that you can implement at your in your group, in your community, in your organizations, and in your own personal and professional life. Starting with professional and personal life, actually there is a very good and easy to use app that was implemented at the beginning of the SDGs that you can download and get not only more information, but you also can set your own priorities, your own goal, and somehow contribute in this collective action for everyone, committed also at the personal level toward this common agenda for a better world. In terms of projects and organizations, to understand project reporting, obviously you need to have some basic on the logic model and the change model, which is implemented, we teach to our students in management and nonprofit management, in particular in the social sector management, the importance of those frameworks. And I'm very happy that colleagues like our colleagues at SOPACT here in Silicon Valley have been implementing technology, standardized technology, and also implementing academic tools and kind of training tools for people to understand how to integrate technology with this framework and integrating the SDGs into their own reporting. So I invite you to look at these important developments. This is also true for major corporations like Salesforce, that in their own database systems, they actually are helping with the help of other additional integrated approaches to do an integration of the SDGs in our own report. And that's what technology in the future certainly will play a much stronger role in the sustainability reporting. So what is corporate reporting? Obviously the GRI, even though it's a voluntary reporting in United States and other countries outside of the EU system, is still kind of a default. Many corporations, they do want to have this type of reporting, and they follow the standards. The standards of the GRI that have been implemented along the years, and they got better, in terms of environmental, labor standards, in terms of use of material, and also their obviously economic alignment with this priority, with more social responsibilities and more responsible governance and the transparency in their own governance. The United Nations Global Compact that started in the year 2000 is being certainly on the forefront for promoting this mindset and leadership commitment of corporations toward those basic 10 principles that follow human rights, commitment, labor rights and standards, as well as environmental standards and rights, and anti-corruption, which is the UN Global Compact Principle 10. They also have a great resource for numerous topics that organizations or others who might be working in conjunction with corporations, or even us as a consumers, we want to foster a more corporate cultures that align with these sustainability principles and practices for reporting. Their communication on progress, which is a specific annual reporting that corporations are asked to do, are very helpful to see what some of the best practices that exist out there in terms of sustainability practices among different elements, including human rights, rule of law, indigenous people, and so on and so forth. The integration of the reporting for the GRI, the Global Compact, has been happening since actually the publication of the SDG Compass. And they've been helpful for not just doing the reporting, but also for implementing a strategic governance and priority of the organizations for aligning their own priorities with the SDGs. And we see more and more organizations and corporations doing this, and that it's very hopeful to see that. This is the SDG Compass that for the first time was providing a guideline for aligning the organizational performance with these kind of SDGs, which are obviously at the national level. And those are the mechanisms that exist for mapping. Important to mention is also the impact assessment of the B-Lab, which is becoming more popular, not only for benefit corporations and other type of organizations that want to assess and score their performance for environmental, again, labor standards, and as well as obviously governance standards and human rights standards on these 200 scale points, in which with 80 plus points, you get the certification. And there are numerous leader companies that have been investing on this, and there is something to be observed and certainly encouraged to many. Interesting enough is also the recent development and collaboration between B-Lab and the United Nations Global Compact, who have created the SDG Action Manager, a simple to use tool for tracking the company progress toward the Sustainable Development Goals. The sustainability reporting is also specialized across different sectors, including higher education. So university, for example, many of them, they follow the STARS system, the Sustainability Tracking, Assessment, and Rating Systems, which helps them to self-report and track their progress toward standardized metrics that assess their performance for alignment of sustainability with their curriculum, with their research, with their engagement with the community, and of course with their own operational practices and leadership. The principle responsible management education is being implemented since 2007. This information on progress or sharing information on progress, or SIP report, which is also available to the public, and we can see how many institutions of higher education are implementing and tracking and measuring their sustainability practices. In terms of the third sector and civil society, for foundations in particular, The SDG Funders is a very large, comprehensive database that map the various investment of foundations toward the social sector along the 17 SDGs. Very helpful databases. In terms of carbon footprint that many organizations are doing and required as a measurement, so this is one of the providers of carbon footprint that helps you to calculate, aim, reduce, offset, and communicate. And there are numerous third-party organizations that they would do for organization in a specialized matrices, but it's very important. And many organizations who are committed towards sustainability, they also invest on an offset, for their own carbon footprint. Obviously, we do not have to forget that we live in a very unsustainable and unequal supply chain systems of our global productions that often goes through many human slavery, people. So this is kind of a more an awareness tool, if you will, but it's kind of a calculation of how many slaves work for us based on our own consumption, personal consumption or organizational consumption. So as I invite you to look at this as well for slaveryfootprint.org, for seeing how this social element of sustainability is certainly an important priority for all of us. In terms of investment, numerous ranking systems for socially responsible funds, they follow the so-called ESG model, the environmental, the social, and the governance model, which obviously has many different practices, but in general, many organizations follow the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investing, or PRI. And there are many also specialized real estate or GRI for real estate, like the ESG benchmark for real assets, as well as certification for building, as in the United States, which is quite common, the so-called LEED certification for buildings, so sustainable and green buildings. I invite you to learn more about this subject. I hope that this has been helpful to stimulate your appetite. Those are some of the leaders that have been implementing this process for a more sustainable future. I invite you to read more about them in our sdg.services website. And I also invite you to learn more with downloadable program toolkits that we have made available, as well as other SDG trainings that will be made available to you in our SDG services website, that you can see how to learn and how to implement and adapt practical skills in your groups and to implement, for example, World Cafe or collective narratives, or taking certifications for increasing your knowledge and increasing also and directing your own profession, your own career, your own contribution toward the sustainable development goals. This is greetings from our students, some of our students who are taking our specialized courses at University of San Francisco in the Master of Nonprofit Administration and in the MBAs, as well as the environmental management programs, that they learn more of these specialized tools, and that's it. Just contact me, send me a note, send me a comment, or connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to be at your service and give you some more suggestions for your career and your commitment to become an effective agent for social change, a sustainable future. I'm happy to contribute to put you in the right direction for helping all of us for a better world. Thank you.